prepared for peace talks with the Taliban. Let's get right to it. Are drones helping or hurting? Hussain Haqqani was Pakistan's ambassador to the United States. He has a new book out about relations between the two countries called Magnificent Delusions. James Steinberg was the chief deputy to Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. He is now the dean of the Maxwell School at Syracuse University. Jim, let me start with you. Does it make sense to assassinate somebody you wanted to head peace talks to try and find some kind of political settlement in Afghanistan?
Well, as you suggested, I think Haqqani Massoud is somebody that the U.S. has been concerned about for a long time. He was directly involved in the attack on the CIA base. His organization was involved in the attack in New York. So the United States has a very fundamental interest in making sure that these threats don't continue. And I think that this has been a long-standing interest of the United States. Clearly, an opportunity seems to have arisen, and I think it's quite understandable from a national security perspective why the administration would want to take advantage of that.
Hussain, you were involved, as was Jim, in the very arduous process of trying to get peace talks started with the Taliban. They were on again, off again, so it took a lot to get them going. From your perspective, assassinating one of the guys who was going to be on the other end of the table, presumably, does it make sense?
Well, if he was going to be at the other end of the table, this was a very, very long table, and he was very far away. He just didn't say that he was going to come to the table. There were no ongoing talks. I think that what we are seeing is a typical Pakistani political reaction, because everybody is afraid that Pakistan's people tend to with the process of negotiating with the Taliban. Look, Haqqani Massoud and his group were put on the American list of high-value targets explicitly at Pakistan's request, because the TTP was wreaking havoc inside Pakistan, and at one time, you may recall that the Pakistani military and intelligence service used to wonder why Americans were not striking the TTP. So I think that this is a time when we need to look at the more fundamental problem in that region, which is rulers and leaders who want to be close to the United States, who want to get involved in negotiating processes to deal with regional situations, but do not want to tell the truth to their own people.
Jim, but let me press this issue, though. If you're going to try to get a political settlement in Afghanistan, clearly at the center of the problem was the Pakistani Taliban, that is, the people based in Pakistan who could cross border, make trouble in Afghanistan, made it very difficult to secure Afghanistan, and then retreat across an international border to a safe haven. So negotiating with the Pakistani Taliban was seen as a very crucial part of trying to create some kind of settlement in Afghanistan. Has that process been derailed by this assassination?
First of all, I don't think it was derailed. I think if there's going to be an agreement, it's not because of the decision of any individual. It will be because all of the organizations, all the groups recognize that finding a political agreement is necessary. So I think the notion that the presence or absence of Haqqani Massoud will make a difference in terms of this. And I think it's important that the message go out that a murderer like Haqqani Massoud, who deliberately killed Americans, can't find sanctuary just simply because he now indicates a vague interest in peace talks. I think it's now time, if the Taliban, both the Afghan Taliban and the Pakistan Taliban, are serious about reaching a political resolution and coming into politics, that they'll come in because that's their interest, not because they somehow find it as a way to get clemency for their past acts of murder.
Hussain, you said something which struck me, which is that there is a tendency in Pakistan to sympathize with the idea of talking to the Taliban. There is a hostility to these kind of targeted attacks. But these guys are terrorists, and they've killed many, many more Pakistanis than they've killed Americans. Why is it that explain for us, is the anti-Americanism so strong that even if America does something that actually gets rid of a terrorist who's killing Pakistani civilians, people assume it must be a bad thing?
Fareed, if you read my book, you will find that the first anti-American demonstration was not a reaction to drone strikes. It took place in May 1948. Pakistan's leaders have consistently negotiated with the United States by riling up the Pakistani public against the U.S. and telling American leaders that I am your best hope of keeping an unruly country under control. And that process has not stopped. So if the Pakistani public is simply not informed or educated about terrorism the way it ought to be, then there will be confusion.
Briefly, Hussein, where does this leave us? Is this, are these protests from the Pakistani government pro forma, and in a few weeks we'll be back to normal?
I think that we will be back to some kind of a relationship. Look, Prime Minister Sharif's visit to Washington recently was the third attempt at a reset in relations between Pakistan and the United States since 9/11. And I don't think he or his government want that attempt to completely fail. I think they will placate public opinion for a little while, but they will come back to talking to the U.S. because at the end of the day, negotiating with the United States is far more important for Pakistan's leaders than negotiating with the Taliban. And when they do negotiate with the Taliban, they will have to have a plan for what they want at the end of it. Do they want Taliban, their ideology, to prevail in Pakistan, or do they really want to take Pakistan into the 21st century?
Hussein Haqqani, James Steinberg, fascinating conversation. We'll be back in touch.